sit back, enjoy yourselves. This is also going to crack your brain open and you're going to be baffled. But you'll begin to understand why there's such lack of empathy and why there's been a pervading pattern between that particular group of supposedly being told that they were causing disturbances in different parts of the world. And a lot of it had to do with the Talmud, but by far deeper and darker after Sabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank. Enjoy.
This behind us, this was the first synagogue that was built in Sarajevo in 1581. It was built by an Ottoman Sultan. He gifted it to the Jewish community in Sarajevo. Before this, in the Balkans, there was minimal Jewish presence. But in 1490, the Jews in Spain were persecuted by the Christians. So the Ottomans told the Jews, you can have safe refuge into the Ottoman Balkans. The Ottomans had their policy of religious tolerance. It was the idea of the millet system, essentially where ethnicities and different religions could rule in accordance to their own religious law. The percentage of Jews in Sarajevo was about 20%, which is a lot. However, after the Ottoman Empire, there's 600 Jews today living. 600 Jews. Muslims, since time began, if you look at Umar radiallahu anh, when he came and conquered Jerusalem, he allowed the Jews to reside in Jerusalem. Then you have a look at Salah ad-Din, he allowed the Jews to reside in Jerusalem. In Spain, the Muslims also allowed Jews to reside in what was known as Andalusia. And now again, the Ottomans, the Muslims, allowed the Jews to have refuge in these lands.
In the 17th century, and I'll make this brief, the details all in the book, a man emerged, a Jewish man called Sabbatai Zevi, and he claimed to be the Jewish Messiah. Messiah had arrived. And he gathered behind him a phenomenal following. All the stuff about this in the book comes from Jewish sources who know about this. And he had 1 million followers at one point. We're looking at the 17th century.
He enters the city and is surrounded by hundreds of people, confident that he's the Messiah. At this time, in 1666, we have heavy evidence that most of Jews in the diaspora, from Yemen to Amsterdam, are believers in Shabtai Tzvi. Synagogues had prayers for him. His picture was printed next to King David's in many prayer books with an inscription, "Save our people." And Jews who opposed him said, "We are living in messianic times, but Shabtai Tzvi is not the Messiah." But they couldn't say this out loud, as they'd be beaten. Sephardic and Ashkenazic Jews had a similar response. Sabbatianism helped unite the diaspora, showing that both sides had the same issues and expectations, and the same messianic craze. These were Jewish communities that had never spoken to each other before.
Sabbatai Zevi was born in 1626 to a wealthy merchant family in Smyrna, a town on the west coast of Turkey known as Izmir today. He rose to be a charismatic rabbi and Kabbalist who, in 1666, declared himself to be the Messiah. This eccentric mystic managed to attract over 1 million devotees during his lifetime. A remarkable achievement given this was about half of the Jewish population in the 17th century. Thanks to the printing press in the previous century, the Lurianic Kabbalah, named after the famed Rabbi Isaac Luria, was broadly disseminated, allowing Jews everywhere access to the occult literature. Popularity of Jewish mysticism was on the rise during a time of persecution, and it was on this stage that Sabbatai Zevi stepped up to the podium. Drawing from ancient Babylonian occultism and interpretations of the Kabbalah, Sabbatai promoted the concept and practice of redemption through sin. There was a growing sense of hopelessness among the Jewish population for the long-awaited Messiah. Sabbatai played on the widely held expectation that the Messiah would return in 1646 and announced, during an episode of Illumination, that he was indeed that Messiah. He was a man of charming personality, handsome, possessed an enchanted singing voice, and radiated an angelic aura, according to some first-hand reports. Converting the masses seemed to have come easily, with many rabbis confessing to have had dreams of Sabbatai appearing to them as the Messiah. Here was a charismatic mystic who seemed to fit the bill of a Messiah, although his illuminated episode suggested something less than divine. Some interpret his behavior as bipolar, others some form of psychotic disorder, or maybe possessed. Regardless, his esoteric mysticism, replacing Jewish law with depraved and immoral behavior, had him expelled from Smyrna in the early 1650s. Sabbatai resurfaced in 1658 in Constantinople, where preacher Abraham Yachini declared Sabbatai's messianic destiny. With a document forged by the Talmudic scholar Joseph Trani, prophesying Sabbatai's legitimacy, Sabbatai went to Salonika to proclaim himself the Anointed One. However, he was soon banished from the city by the local rabbis, sending him on a journey through a handful of major cities before settling in Cairo in 1660. Here, he was supported by a wealthy and influential Jew, Raphael Joseph Halabi, who promoted Sabbatai's messianic claims. Moving to Jerusalem around 1663, he once again garnered a large following, in no small part due to his rich and powerful connection in Cairo, who may have been able to ease the Ottoman tax burden in Jerusalem. When he was sent to Cairo to appeal to Raphael Joseph Halabi on behalf of the Jerusalem Jews, another event took place that further elevated his fame. There was a Jewish orphan named Sarah from a Polish Christian convent, who at 16 had made her way to Amsterdam and then Italy, where she became a prostitute. She was also convinced that she would be the bride of the Messiah. Sabbatai, after hearing the story of Sarah, claimed that he had been promised in a dream that he would fall in love with an unchaste woman, not unlike the prophet Hosea, and that Sarah was the one. He sent for her, and they were married. Her eccentric character and beauty apparently gained the would-be Messiah even greater fame. Sabbatai and his new wife went back to Jerusalem, where he met Nathan Benjamin Levi, known as Nathan of Gaza, and who saw himself as the risen Elijah who would usher in the Messianic age. Nathan announced 1666 would see the conquest of the world and the beginning of the Messiah's reign. But the rabbis of Jerusalem were less than impressed and threatened to excommunicate Sabbatai and his followers. Sabbatai retreated to his native Smyrna, where he would be more readily accepted as the Messiah. It was in Smyrna and in Philadelphia, about 105 miles east, that the book of Revelation describes a synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. By 1665, Sabbatai had become an international sensation, with many prominent rabbis clinging to his claims. However, this was short-lived. By 1666, after Sabbatai's plans to abolish a host of Jewish rituals shocked many of the previously sympathetic Jews. He left Smyrna, probably kicked out, early in 1666 and went on to Constantinople. It was here, however, that he was swiftly arrested and imprisoned by the Sultan of Turkey. Even in prison, Sabbatai was able to spin the whole ordeal in his favor, garnering more fame and prayers as stories of the miraculous deeds of this Messiah were disseminated and the messianic craze intensified. Hungarian Jews unthatched their roofs in preparation for the end of their exile, and Jews in Amsterdam prepared to sell their homes. In Hamburg synagogues, Jews would be dancing and jumping in jubilation over the coming redemption. This would continue until a certain Nehemiah HaKohen managed to get word to Sultan Mehmed IV, who became aware of Sabbatai's ambitions. Things would end abruptly for Sabbatai when, on September 15, 1666, the Turkish Sultan gave him three choices: be tested regarding his divinity by avoiding a volley of arrows, be impaled, or convert to Islam. Other commentators say he was offered two choices, Islam or beheading. It is not certain exactly what happened, but Sabbatai's choice was clear. He chose to convert to Islam the next day on the 16th, along with his wife and 300 families who were following him. He also took on a second wife to confirm his conversion and was employed as the Sultan's doorkeeper. He wrote to the community at Smyrna saying, "God has made me an Ishmaelite." He commanded, and it was done. The 9th day of my regeneration. Not to be outdone, Sabbatai's right-hand man, Nathan, perpetuated an alternative interpretation of events. Apparently, Sabbatai's conversion to Islam was all about descending in order to reclaim the lost spark of divine light that was required to repair the world. Such mystical actions based on Gnostic ideas must have impressed some faithful followers, but for the majority, there was just disillusionment. Sabbatai died in isolation on September 17, 1676, not having ushered in the Messianic age. Nevertheless, a remnant of Sabbateans remained, and a revival would come about in the 18th century under Jacob Frank, who claimed to be a reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi. Frank expanded on the ideas of Sabbatai, including the idea of redemption through sin, a paradoxical teaching that the coming Messianic age transforms sexual prohibitions into permissions and even obligations. Frank taught that engaging in sexual orgies was the way to purify the soul from sin. In an extreme departure from morality, he insisted that child sacrifice, rape, incest, and the drinking of blood were acceptable and necessary religious rituals. This was all part of his philosophy that, to usher in a new society, there must be the destruction of the old, albeit done in secret, a doctrine called the Way of Esau. He also endorsed the Gnostic idea that the biblical God was evil and not the creator. In total rejection of the Torah and traditional interpretations, Frank converted to both Islam and Catholicism, slept with his followers, including his daughter, and preached that the imitation of God was to transgress every taboo, cross every boundary, and mix the sacred with the profane. As part of the secret mission of his believers, Frank convinced his followers that, just as Sabbatai had descended into Islam, they should outwardly become Christians to conceal the secrets of their faith. Frank led 60,000 European Jews in baptism into the Catholic Church. Although his following was something like 20 times less than Sabbatai, his nihilistic mystical cult did have powerful European royalty, nobility, and bankers among its ranks, a remarkable feat given Frank's totally corrupt and degenerate philosophy. According to Frank, one must be free of all laws, conventions, religions, all positive systems of belief, and commit strange acts of voluntary abasement in utter disregard to authority in order to descend into the abyss and fix the soul. This was to be done in silence with deceit, the so-called burden of silence. And then in the 1770s there came about a powerful alliance in Frankfurt, when Jacob Frank would join forces with another secret society and a very wealthy individual. Johann Adam Weishaupt was the son of Jewish parents who had converted to Catholicism in Bavaria. His father, a professor of law, died when Adam was just 5 years old. Adam was educated by the Jesuits, learning 5 languages and becoming a professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt. When he was just 28, he founded the Orden der Perfectibilisten, otherwise known as the Illuminati, named in honor of Lucifer, the bearer of light, on May 1st, 1776. His secret society had a list of long-term goals of abolishing monarchies, governments, private property, inheritances, patriotism, nationalism, family life, marriage, religion, and to establish communal education for children. Socialist phenomenon that had long been grasped by various groups through the centuries, and indeed would be foundational to Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. In short, the Illuminati Manifesto was to secretly rule the world by establishing a new world order. The Illuminati then successfully infiltrated the Masonic lodges for their power and influence in society. Weishaupt was calculating, scheming, immoral, and narcissistic. A French Jesuit priest who studied Weishaupt in the late 18th century said he was an odious phenomenon in nature, an atheist void of remorse, a profound hypocrite destitute of those superior talents which lead to the vindication of truth. He is possessed of all that energy and ardor in vice which generates conspirators for impiety and anarchy. Shunning, like the ill-boding owl, the genial rays of the sun, he wraps around him the mantle of darkness, and history shall record of him, as of the evil spirit, only the black deeds which he planned or executed. The third member of this trio was Mayer Amschel Rothschild, founder of the Rothschild dynasty, who provided financial backing for the work of the Illuminati and brought the Sabbatean Frankists, sometimes referred to as the cult of the all-seeing eye, into a secret yet powerful trinity. This cabal, initially working through Freemasonry, was dedicated to bring about a new world order. Recruits to this cabal were intelligent men from the arts, science, business, and politics. They were tasked with social engineering, using tactics such as bribery, extortion, opportunity promotion, scholarships, whatever was necessary to steer policies and people in whatever direction was required. But was this cabal just looking for world domination through a new world order? It seems there was a deeper motivation, a motivation to usher in the Messiah and Messianic age, in which, of course, this new enlightened cabal would rule and reign. This was to be done by the increase of sin, by turning the established moral code on its head, destroying, no less, the European heterosexual Christian character of Western society. The destruction of Christianity, monarchies, nationalism, family and marriage, private property and any collective identity would all be key features of this spiritual and political revolution. The promotion of promiscuity and all manner of sexual deviance, undermining nationalism, race, gender, and promoting diversity and the universal brotherhood, would all play a part in a kaleidoscopic Hegelian dialectic of East and West, of communism and capitalism, of rich and poor, black and white, male and female, resolving everything into the expected synthesis of a one-world order. This grand scheme could not possibly be done without the Rothschilds purchasing and thus controlling Reuters and other influential news agencies. This gave the cabal the means to control the narrative through the most influential press outlets in Europe. Additionally, the Anti-Defamation League, established in 1913, gave cover for the cabal's activities, slandering anyone who dared question the Rothschilds' agenda as being anti-Semitic. And to empower even more an already powerful dynasty, Congress voted on the Rothschilds' Federal Reserve Act in December 1913. Woodrow Wilson, the president at the time, said later in his book, The New Freedom,
"However it has come about, it is more important still that the control of credit also has become dangerously centralized. It is the mere truth to say that the financial resources of the country are not at the command of those who do not submit to the direction and domination of small groups of capitalists who wish to keep the economic development of the country under their own eye and guidance. The great monopoly in this country is the monopoly of big credits. So long as that exists, our old variety and freedom and individual energy of development are out of the question. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is privately concentrated."
And concentrated indeed was the power of these illuminated elites with a view to rule the world. The stage was set for this Illuminati, Sabbatian, Frankists, Rothschild trio to manipulate the world stage throughout the 20th century. Has the legacy of Sabbatai Zevi become fuel for a cabal of elite religious ideologues, hell-bent on ruling the world through a stranglehold on politics, finance, and the media?
Hey guys, if you want to watch more clips, click here.
And if you want to watch the full podcast, click right here.